Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 38 of Season 5. Tonight we are discussing The Frame. We're going to be looking in detail at The Frame episode by episode as we go through Season 5. We've talked about the concept of The Frame a few different times, but now that we have worked through the majority of the episodes, and we know there's only 2 episodes we haven't discussed in detail, and we know what those are. Those are the Dagor Bragalach and the Death of Fingolfin episodes. So there's little suspense left on the planning front as far as what's going to be contained in those episodes. So we'll be looking at how The Frame sort of works all the way through. I'm really excited to do a kind of a big picture look at The Frame. I know that we kind of intended to talk about The Frame as we went along, which could have been good in its own way. And if it had happened, it would have been nice. But this actually, I really like the opportunity to kind of back up and look at this as a story as a whole, and then be thinking about it in conjunction with the season episodes as we go. So I am joined tonight by Nick Palazzo from our writers' room, and Dave couldn't make it with us today, so it's just the two of us here this evening. We will attempt to soldier on. Before we start, a couple quick announcements. We have our regional moots coming up. We've got New England Moot on the 25th of September and Middle Moot on the 9th of October. Those are in Durham, New Hampshire and Waterloo, Iowa, respectively. Everyone welcome to there, and anyone who can't make it there in person could attend digitally or astrally online. Both of them will have both of them are fully hybrid. I'm actually right now in the middle of working with folks planning the both the sort of the concepts and the tech hookups involved for the hybrid production of those, which is a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. Hope you guys will be able to join us for those moots as Signum Regional Moots return. And then I would like to announce that in the Mythgard Academy, we're going to be discussing The Nature of Middle-earth, edited by Carl Hostetter, that was just released here in America. Sorry, Alana in Australia, who can't get it until October, and I think in Canada it's not released until October either. But don't worry, when you get the book, we'll have barely begun starting it. You can wait, watch the first few episodes asynchronously, and catch up with us in just a couple weeks. But anyway, we're starting on Bilbo and Frodo's birthday on September 22nd at 10 p.m. We're going to start a Mythgard Academy discussion of the nature of Middle-earth. We're going to go through bit by bit. There will be an attendee link for that. I'll be broadcasting those on the normal channels here, like I'm doing this. And I will be there, but there will also be another link, a Zoom link actually, for us to for the people who want to attend live and discuss it with me. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to do that again week after next. Bilbo's birthday, 10 p.m. We will start our discussion on the nature of Middle-earth and probably take the next 6 months or so talking our way through the nature of Middle-earth, because there's some rich material in here to talk about. So really fascinating stuff. And we're just kind of chatting about this backstage before we started. But anyway, for those of you, if the nature of Middle-earth has not been on your radar screen, get it. It is. This is the first Tolkien work. I know there have been a whole lot of Tolkien books published, over the last 5-10 years. For a dead author, he's been enormously prolific in the last couple decades. But this is the first. This is some of the first new material that we've gotten of Middle-earth stuff. This is the first new Middle-earth stuff we've gotten in, goodness, a long time. When was the last time we got brand new Middle-earth stuff? I mean, we got some really cool stuff. We got the Fall of Arthur. We got his Beowulf papers. Those were things that had never been released before. But it might even be since the Peoples of Middle-earth was published, volume 12 of the History of Middle-earth, that we've had any actual new content. But this is new stuff that's never been published before. So anyway, it's very, very exciting. So anyway, join me on September 22nd, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And that'll also, of course, be released on our YouTube page, the Signum YouTube page, and on the Mythgard Academy podcast feed as well. So, all right. Now, also, this is also the last chance to join our fall semester. Our fall semester courses at Signum are up and running, and actually tomorrow, Friday, is the last day that you can still join our classes. So if you've been thinking about auditing one of our classes, there is still time to do so, but only just. So get right on that. All right. With that, let us return to the frame discussion here. So first, actually, let me back up even a step beyond this, right? Just to make sure, to remind everybody of like what the frame is and what's the point of it and why we have one, right? I won't go back over like all of our discussions about the frame over the last 6 or 7 years, but basically the concept was we wanted from the beginning to kind of contextualize the first age material that we're covering, in the season proper, in the episodes proper, and to kind of make a kind of a touch point for that from within the context of third age stuff that's more familiar to our viewers. And in particular, I have really liked using the frame mechanism as a way to make connections, right? To invite people to think about how the ancient history traditions of the Silmarillion are relevant to the Lord of the Rings. The kind of parallels between them and the applicability of the one to the other is very clear and very rich and very important. And so it just seemed like kind of too good of an opportunity. When we first started off, Nick, as you'll remember in season 1, it was especially to try to give some sort of context to it, right? When we were starting in season 1, we started with the Ainulindale, right? And you just the curtain rises on like the music of the Ainur, like who is even gonna have any idea what the heck is going on there, right? How do you contextualize it without just like a corny voiceover or something like that? Purely, it's so we put it in a third age context. Of course, our very first frame. Each season has its own frame arc, its own frame story, and the frame story of season 1 was young Estelle in Rivendell going through a bit of a difficult period in his growth and learning lessons. And we had some, looking at some of the kind of oddity of being a human child being raised in Rivendell and some of the kind of tensions that his mother Gilrain felt, and Elrond being his teacher and instructor. And of course it was in that context that we were explicitly invoking those as lessons that he was being taught by Elrond. As we've gone forward in the seasons, the frame has become not quite, originally we were doing it in almost a Book of Lost Tales kind of way, where we had the story was the frame, right? And within that story, they were telling the stories, which were the episodes. And we've kind of stepped back a little bit from that, but we've maintained the shape of having this third age story, which makes contact with that. And I was noticing, Nick, that there were a couple nods still back towards the old shape, right? Of, times when we have Gandalf in this frame telling stories, right, from the Silmarillion, and even inviting the possibility to imagine that he's telling them some of the stories that, we're showing in this season. So I like that. I think that's, I still think that's pretty cool. But again, we want each frame to have a narrative of its own. And this, I know, Nick, is one of the biggest challenges, right? We want to have there to be an overarching plot arc within the frame, but we only get what, like 2 minutes an episode, 3 minutes an episode, no, a little more than that. 5,
probably 5 to maybe 10 minutes on some, because there are some episodes throughout the various seasons that we've had where we've gone into the frame during the episode. In fact, there was one episode, I believe in season 4, where the scenes that we were seeing in the main story were so disconnected that the only way to kind of tie it all together was to use the frame and to tell a bigger story in the frame in that episode, to kind of as the kind of cohesive the tendons that were holding it all together, essentially.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now the concept, I won't go over the concept in too much detail because we've talked about it before, but the brief summary, we decided that we wanted to have a Gandalf in Harad. That is Gandalf as Incanus visiting the south. The text suggests that he does go to the south. The question is, he says he's known as Incanus in the south. Where would that be? And so we are saying he went to Harad, right? And why not? Why wouldn't he? It doesn't seem any absolute reason why he shouldn't do that. So we have him going. So we decided, the initial concept was he's going to go to, there's basically a Hobbiton of the South, as we were saying. Like there's a place like Hobbiton where he has visited before, made himself known to the prominent local families, and might, occasionally still drops in and visits, though irregularly. And when they do see him, he's this kind of, figure out of history, right, who kind of has returned to them again, just like Bilbo's experience when he sees Gandalf again at the beginning of The Hobbit.
Legend springing out of the grass.
That's it. Yes. Disturber of the peace and all that kind of thing. And of course, we had a delightfully fun episode. It lives in my memory, Nick, as one of the most entertaining to discuss sessions we've had of the whole season. Actually, when we did our world building for the frame episode, that was so much fun. Where we built up the history of this city-state, this independent city-state down in Far Harad. And its relationship with the Corsairs and its historical relationship to the Númenóreans and to Sauron and everything else. So, Nick, did I ever tell you that when I explained all this stuff and our Sauron festivals and everything around the fire pits at Mythmoot, before the end of the week they were composing they were composing Christmas carols?
Yes, word had reached me even through even in absentia. Word had reached me.
I thought it might have
sorts of things.
Yes, a slip of the tongue that somebody was when they accidentally elided Santa Claus and Anatar and called him Sanitar, and which led to here comes Sanitar carols and everything. It was epic. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. So it's good fun. And so we have our cast of characters here down there. Again, we can't have too many characters, but we have Gandalf, of course, as Incanus, Azraindil, the queen, Abrazan and Arnuben, her sons, and those are designed to be sort of parallel to Boromir and Faramir in some ways. We've got they're close. They're only about 2 years apart. And both young men, 2 years apart. Abrazan is the older one, is like Boromir, more brawn than brains, and Arnuben, the younger, more brainy, more interested in history, more wizard's pupil-ish, and that kind of thing. And then we have the Mouth of Sauron, and we should probably contextualize just a little bit some of the decisions we made earlier on. We decided that the Mouth of Sauron was going to be a ceremonial title. It's not a person. It's like an office, basically. Since we know, as Tolkien explained, that one of the primary ways that Sauron exerted his control over the lands in his dominion, especially in the east and south, was through cult worship of himself. Basically, he set himself up as a god in those places and had a cult of his worship. We decided that the Mouth of Sauron was essentially going to be like the high priest of Sauron's cult. And so the Mouth of Sauron that we meet in this frame is not the Mouth of Sauron, who is going to be who's the dude who comes out of the Black Gate at the end of the Return of the King. This Mouth of Sauron is a woman, we had decided. Anyway, so the basic story tension of the frame tale is Gandalf goes down to his old friend to visit his old friends in his Hobbiton of the South, and he finds that the Mouth of Sauron is in town. The emissaries of Sauron have come and are preaching in the streets and are beginning, because the timing of this is it's 70 years prior to the beginning of the Lord of the Rings. In other words, Sauron has just returned to Mordor and declared himself, right? So he is beginning the process, which is going to take a while, right? It's going to take many, many years for him to re-solidify his control of the people in the south and east. People often forget about that. People often think that like Sauron returns to Mordor and like, boom, he's got all his armies and there he goes, right?
It's interesting because there's a lot of people ask the question, well, what was Gandalf doing during this time? Like, why did he just let Sauron just accrue power and stuff? Well, now here's your answer. This is what he was doing.
Yeah.
We've created an answer.
Exactly. Because of course there was always a general sense, right, that at the very, one of the popular answers, one of Tolkien's potential answers to the question, what are the Blue Wizards up to, for instance, what was their job, was working against Sauron's recruitment and control processes in the east and south. And of course, Tolkien kind of seems to change his mind about the extent to which, or whether or not they failed or succeeded in this task. But again, that's another thing that we really wanted to sort of show is some of that work in action, or at the very least, some kind of like need for that work, right? To sort of show the issues here. Because, and this is so, none of this stuff, of course, we have no textual basis. The only textual basis we have for this is first, the reference that Gandalf has been in the South. And then secondly, just speculation based on what Tolkien said happened, right? There's several decades worth of conditioning, assertion of his control and then conditioning. Yeah, exactly. As Ilana was reminding us, Tolkien explains, he talks about this at the end, and you can read about this at the end of Morgoth's Ring, Volume 10 of the History of Middle-earth. Tolkien talks about how Sauron had to actively bring the peoples of the East and South to the place where they'll march in an army alongside orcs without being appalled and disgusted at doing that. Which means he is working on the active moral degradation of these peoples. And so we were really interested to take a crack at saying, what would that look like? How would that start? What is that? How does that process happen? Tolkien left plenty of time for that to happen. I mean, 70 years is still pretty quick, but for that kind of like cultural shift. But again, he's not snapping his fingers to do it. So, all right, let's jump into the story itself. Now, I love these tables. Thank you, Marie, for putting these together. I think it was Marie who put these together, right? Because this shows the plots of the episodes and then the plots of each frame as we go through. So let's look at these first four here. In the first one is one of the longest frame sessions, right? We have more frame in episode 1 than we get in most of the rest of them, as I recall.
Yeah, we get a little bit more than usual, mostly because we have to introduce the setting. nobody's ever been here before. And that was, you mentioned before how important it was to keep the character list short. And that's also because, in addition to the fact that we've never met these people before, we've never even met their culture. So
Right.
it would be so easy for everybody to just kind of fade into the background, and just become caricatures. And we didn't want that.
Right. Right. So we started. So as I recall, we've got 3 scenes in this one. Right. We've got the scene of Gandalf on board the ship. Right. So he's taking ship from. And he was from Pelargir. Was it that he was leaving from Pelargir, or was he going? Would he go down further first?
Think he was. Marie might remember better than I, but the idea was that he was traveling. Yeah, from Pelargir. Marie says. The idea is that he is kind of traveling in incognito a little bit. Not that like he's in any danger.
Right.
Getting on a ship in Minas Tirith, that's perfectly
Right.
reasonable to do. But if the steward of Gondor knew that he was heading down to their, sworn enemies in the south, he might have some questions as to what he's doing down there.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's true. And it's one of the interesting things about Gandalf's position here, both in connection, as we can sort of see and set up here at the very beginning, but of course, especially once he's down there in how do we pronounce it? Urisakal. I think
Your guess is as good as mine.
something like that. Yeah. Anyway,
Urisakal.
People will keen observers will notice that we are using essentially Adunaic styled names for down there, and that was quite on purpose. But anyway, okay. So, but what I was saying was, when he gets down there and is speaking with is talking with the Queen, he's not like he's going to be treated, or they're going to think of him almost as if he's an emissary from Gondor, right? I mean, he's associated with Gondor in the minds of people down there, but he is very distinctly not a political representative of the steward, and is going down indeed even without the steward's knowledge. So he is completely independent, and yet there is a certain entanglement of his visit with the sort of the politics with Gondor. And yes, Stephen, great question. Icthelion is steward at this time, so this is still in the time of the youth of Denethor.
Marie disagrees.
Oh, sorry. Icthelion's father is still alive. Oh, for 2 more years. Oh, okay, it's 2 years before the death of his
Turgon.
Turgon, right?
That's interesting.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I was thinking Icthelion the whole time, but yeah, if it's 70.
If I had known that, I would have pushed harder to incorporate him into that, because that would have been fun and confusing.
Yes,
because there's not enough confusing naming going on in this season.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. So you would like picture a scene with like him from behind, a man in regal costume seen from behind sitting in a garden or something, and someone calls out Turgon, and he turns around and it's not Turgon, it's this random dude we've never seen before,
standing in his concentrically circled city, under a tree,
exactly. Yeah, good. No, it's yeah, you're right. It is a wonderful opportunity to confuse our viewers that we seem to have lost. But anyway, so
we have 2 Galdors in this season, so we're fine.
It's true. So you think that meets our quota? Does it? Our confusion quota.
We did find a way to get Celegorm and Celeborn in a room together, so
Hey, all right. Oh, that's been a long time coming too.
Oh wait, no, they weren't. We had to make a special. We'd make a special change to the plot to avoid that very eventuality, which is how Celegorm wound up working with Fingon to defeat Glaurung the first time around. That's
I
right.
see. Maybe we should just introduce them. Maybe it would help people to get them confused, less.
We did introduce Mithros and Mablung, which was that was shaky and confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as Mygwin wasn't in the room at the same time, then I think that might be too much. Yeah. Yeah. And Marie, you're right. This is even before we get into the fact that Minas Tirith is also in both places. But never mind. Oh, it's all good. It's all good. See, this, like, making contact with the third age just makes everything better.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. All right. So Turgon is still, not that it doesn't matter particularly. He's not going to appear, as we've said, but okay. So we have him arrive. So we've got him on board ship, which gives us the opportunity to explain where he's going, and why he's doing it. And it enables us to set up how far he's traveling, like the strained but not at war state of political relations between Gondor and them, to just sort of provide some context for where they're headed. And then he arrives. We have the marketplace and bazaars at the beginning, right as he's going through, and that's when he first sees the Sauron street preacher, right?
Yes. Essentially, he kind of, and there's no confrontation there. He just kind of witnesses him from afar, because we want to set up this tension as early as possible.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we have very honest, earnest sounding language from this street preacher, because he really believes this. The religion surrounding Sauron is something that people legitimately and earnestly believe, and something that at one time was the path to power and safety for this community.
Right. Was tied to their heritage. They still have, so all of this stuff, that is all the stuff related to Numenor and to Sauron, was millennia ago. So it's the ancient history of this city. But we were imagining this city to be one of those cities, like a Mediterranean or Middle Eastern city, which has been standing and doing its thing for 3,000 years at least, right? So, for by this time, 4,000 or 5,000 years. So it's ancient history.
Old when the Númenóreans got there, even.
Yes, exactly. So it's like Damascus or something like that, right? Yeah. A city with 5,000 to 7,000 years of history. So this is ancient history, but it's still remembered, because there's still monuments. There's still the old temple, right? The ruins of the old temple, which are going to play a major part in the frame. And then we have, and of course, like we must also remember that within the ancient history of these people, the Númenóreans are the bad guys, and Sauron was their savior, who saved them from the Númenóreans, right? Mostly, they have happy memories of Sauron.
Yes, it's complicated. We managed to make a complex set of factional relationships within the city, right. which I love, and I love the idea that while the royal family is descended from the Númenóreans,
yes,
that family at the time, during the Second Age, converted, like actually joined with Sauron willingly, rather than to avoid being overthrown, to protect their own power.
Right, exactly, because they were being threatened by the Númenórean kingsmen, basically. Yeah.
Right. And so what this will do is it will mean that, and we're basically going to have a callback to that later on in the season when we get out to episodes 12 and 13, where that's going to be repeated.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And so this is the kind of foundation. And this is, I mean, I think to me, this is a really interesting opportunity to look at this kind of foundation that Sauron needs to build on, right, when he's trying to build his new cult. Okay, so we get his at the end of episode 1, Gandalf meets the Queen, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so we get his kind of reintroduction and her like, hey, you're still alive. So there's clearly something mysterious about him, because she totally expected that he should have died because it's been a long time since he was there. And yet there he is. So his kind of mysterious wizard credentials are established in that sense at the very beginning. When you guys are thinking about the frame, to what extent do we think about, or should we, do you guys think, be thinking about this on an episode by episode basis? That is to say, clearly we want the frame as a whole to be, the story of the frame as a whole to be wrestling with some of the same kinds of issues that the season as a whole is. It can be the frame can be a really interesting mechanism for like drawing attention to some of the primary themes, right? The themes that we want, because it's simpler, right? Because it's a briefer story. It has fewer elements and fewer dimensions. So, it's possible for somebody to watch the main episodes and, they might get interested in a particular subplot or a particular character. And it's possible that they won't be thinking about and focusing on the main themes that we're thinking about and we're really kind of wanting to develop. The frame gives us a kind of a briefer way to kind of, or like, another shot at kind of pointing to those similar themes, and for them to be kind of thinking about how those things work together. As a whole, that works. Mm-hmm. But go ahead.
I think that one of the things that, like, as the theme of change and how different people deal with change and how that impacts us, now, of course, in the main story, it was very much about the way that change affects men versus how it affects elves, but different people in the main story deal with change in very different ways.
Yes.
And I think that what we kind of wound up doing with the frame story is showing how the resistance to change on the part of the general population, well, not the leadership of this city state, it kills them. It literally kills them, because they were not able to accept any change. They're kind of trying to maintain the status quo the whole way through. Abrazan, the older brother, kind of represents the kind of accepting of good change and moving along with it to do something better, right? Whereas the younger brother he exemplifies the acceptance of change in a very different way, or using the resistance to change on the parts of other people to kind of formulate his own, change that benefits him personally.
Right.
Because essentially change is a thing that happens and you kind of have to accept it. And what you do with that is kind of what defines you.
Yeah. And I love the sense in which the frame also serves. There's a way in which it serves almost as a kind of mirror reverse, right? Like the whole human stories, all the human stories, especially within season 5, are establishment stories, right? Like the new culture of this and that, and that like, let's establish new traditions and decide what direction we're going to take our peoples. Whereas here we have these later scions of an old culture, right, looking back on the millennia of history of their families and their city,
which may in fact have been being established concurrently with the main story.
Yes, right? Yes, exactly. So, just as we've done before, having like characters overlapping, like some elves that are still around, when we get to the frame and stuff like that. But anyway, we did, especially with Galadriel and Celeborn in season 2, for instance, right? But anyway, yeah. So we have humans dealing with change but sort of from a very different kind of perspective, right? Because there is no, or there's at least very little of the like, but this is the way we've always done things kind of element of the human within the human cultures themselves, right? The adapting to new times and new ways is more of an elvish issue, right, within season 5. And so that I think is kind of an interesting thing that we get to do there in the frame. But okay, so as we go through, to what extent should we be thinking of it? And how much were you guys thinking about an episode by episode basis, though? So like the correspondence, not just of the overall frame story to the overall, but, you know, show by show.
There was definitely a push and pull between serving as a good solid frame for the main story, while also advancing the plot of the frame narrative, which is one of the things that you run into when because over time we have definitely had to fight the urge to put too much stuff in the frame narrative. And I think that season 3 is probably a good example of this, where we really struggled to relate the frame to the main story because there was so much we were trying to get done in the frame story.
Right.
In this one, I feel like we kind of walked the line pretty well, and definitely tried to find ways to hook in the story that we were telling. Like, even if we were kind of pigeonholed into a particular idea for the frame story, finding a spin on it or a way of telling it, an angle to tell it from, that would relate to the main story.
Right. Okay. So, episode 1, we have Gandalf's arrival, and at the same time, in the episode as a whole, we've got Beor's arrival primarily, Arathel's decision to leave Gondolin, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's episode 1, so we're doing a lot of setup, you know, of this and that, but it seems like to me, the primary kind of juxtaposition here, I think, is Beor, right? We got Beor and his people arriving, and Gandalf arrives to find this human culture that's been rooted in place for millennia.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's kind of it sets up this sort of interesting contrast there, I think, from the very start. But we also kind of pick up on with Beor, we have the meeting with Finrod and the establishment of this first elf-human relationship. And correspondingly, that realization, right, when Azraindil, the queen, is sort of realizing that Gandalf is not mortal in the normal way, right? So there's a kind of
there's a recognition of, this is somebody I need to kind of attach myself to, because if anybody's been around for this long definitely knows some things, and I might want to take advantage of that. I think episode 2 also does this particular tie-in very well, because it deals with the kind of the establishment of purpose. This is when Fingolfin first starts to learn from.
Right. This is the first Doll episode.
Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And so the idea is, this is when the teaching begins. Is in this particular episode, and it touches on the theme of change, because Azraindil kind of knows that something's got to give. She doesn't. I think that she thinks she's going to have a lot more time than she does. She sees the change that is happening as something that's going to be very gradual, and her sons need to be prepared to deal with that in ways that they're not going to be prepared. And someone who's been around for a few thousand years, that's the guy who knows what that means.
Right. So bringing Gandalf in as a tutor for her sons, and we can certainly see some of the kind of smaller motifs being picked up on, the Beor training Adenel and Fingolfin being confronted with thinking about things like this is the beginning of that arc of Fingolfin thinking about succession and that kind of thing. So Azraendil's concern about her sons and what they're going to do and how they're going to move forward into this. Good. Oh, right. Emery was reminding us that episode 1, there's a discussion about the light and the dark, seeking the light in the west and stuff, the people of Beor and such. Aredhel interested in standing against the darkness and not just, remaining in the light of Gondolin. And we see, although again, it doesn't come to any kind of crisis in episode 1, we can see that same, just the image of the bazaar with Gandalf and the Sauron street preacher both present, right? Sort of show the same, the same issue there. Okay, so then in episode 3, Gandalf Incanus is established as the tutor of the two boys, right? I mean, he's that begins in episode 2, but he's doing his teaching in the 3rd episode, right?
Right. We're actually doing some teaching there, and we're taking some time to set up the character qualities of the two boys. I say boys; they're 18 and 20, whatever it is,
right?
And,
19 and 21, something like that. Yeah.
I'm starting to get to the point where that's a little kid to me, but
right,
I'm not
exactly.
quite.
Exactly. Yeah, I hear that. My son's 18, so I'm with you.
I've heard. I feel super old.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so and the other thing we're doing is establishing the relationship between the two brothers here, right? Making sure to sort of show who they are, and what they seem to value, meanwhile we have within that episode, this is the mortality episode, right? Death and romance with Eol are the two things that are happening in this episode, in that lovely juxtaposition.
Well, mortality, it's interesting that the lesson that Gandalf teaches the boys in this episode is essentially one of the main things that my grandmother attempted. My grandmother's very Italian, wanted very much to impress upon her grandchildren that, your family are the only ones who are going to be there for you throughout your life, and when they're gone, they're gone.
Right.
And little bit of good old Sicilian wisdom there for you.
Right. Exactly. This sense of, and I think again, it's fascinating how that parallel has been established there. Like that there are parallels, but they're not identical parallels, right? We have here Gandalf basically trying to teach to these human guys, right? These young human men, what the elves are learning from observing the humans, right? In the rest of the episode.
Yes.
So again, there's this almost like anti-parallel there between the men of the humans of the frame and the humans of the episode. And again, it certainly does show the kind of thing that we're showing Fingolfin learning, like that this is always a lesson that has to be for every generation of men. This is, yet another thing. Each one is this, has these same pressures, these same lessons have to be learned again and again and again, in every generation. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And then in 4 is when the sort of the story proper really begins, right? Having established the characters and set things up. now we begin the actual story, and it's about the dead birds, right? This bird sacrifice.
It gets a little sinister
Right.
at this point, and we, at this point, we really felt that we needed to kind of up the tension. Things needed to start going somewhere, right? Because it would have been very, very easy to just kind of like meander through the episodes all the way up to episode 10 or so, and then start actually having the action happen. But we didn't want it to come out of nowhere that this had been taking place. And the reality is that these are young men. They're not children.
Right.
So, children, you can kind of like children make silly mistakes that you can use as teachable moments. The cost of these mistakes are not very high. It's like, in season 1, which as much fun as the frame has been for this season 1 is definitely still my favorite frame. But it was really the easiest to work with because you can have Estelle make errors in judgment that didn't have real stakes, right? And so we can use those small, low-stakes errors in judgment to bring out the larger story that we wanted to bring out, and it just doesn't work. But we did it one time in this season where there was a mistake specifically made by one of the boys, which kind of leads into the story proper. And even that, we were kind of teasing the edge of there could be significant consequences to this.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, like, these are young, powerful men, so we kind of have to have them experience the drama rather than be the drama.
Right. Yes, exactly. And this is our first introduction to a lot of the kind of cultural conflict between the people of Urisakal and the Sauron emissaries, right? The Sauron missionaries, right, who are coming down. It's going to seem sort of benign, right? I mean, most of it is going to be. I mean, we're starting gently, right? Like it's bringing up mostly happy memories of the past traditions and everything. And so this is the kind of like below the surface, like, but things are starting. Right. And so starting with an animal sacrifice on the side, right, is with the idea that you can empower yourself somehow by sacrificing these animals does seem to me a very likely kind of step in that kind of moral descent that Tolkien was describing that the human cultures need to be taken through. And so giving this kind of behind the scenes discovery, right, it's already beginning, right? This is not just a neutral, this is not just a cultural issue, right? This is not some kind of, this is not just about history. This is about the future as well.
Yeah. And doing it this way allows us to kind of get at what the leadership of this city-state thinks of the cult of Sauron, because Arbrazan is our voice for that group there, and the idea being that they don't really take it that seriously. It's not like some of the common people are into it, but it's not huge,
right?
So
yeah, absolutely. And of course, what that is, that discovery, the discovery of the sacrificial site, is being juxtaposed with the stockade battle, and Sauron, putting the spell
being generally creepy,
being creepy, right, and everything. So we're seeing that, so that evil being active and the beginning of the machinations of the bad guys is happening pretty much across the board there. So, thematically, that pretty well works. Okay, the middle third here of the season. The Mouth of Sauron arrives. Now, tell me about how you're picturing the connection between the Mouth of Sauron and like the street preachers that we've already had. They're working for her. They're her advanced agents.
So we actually kind of imagined the cult of Sauron to be a grassroots and local thing that has kind of been kept alive over time. It's not like it's not in mass numbers. There's not a lot of like being a member of the cult of Sauron just takes too much time out of your day. Like you have to go to on Monday morning, and then but the real like dedicated devotees go on Monday night as well. And then you also have like your scripture study on Thursday nights, and so you gotta you have to make sure it's a lot. And so like most people just don't like, they're like, yeah, I know Sauron, yeah, hey, but
Right.
I gave last month.
Right.
Right. So these devotees are few. But they go out in service. They go out and they preach the gospel of Sauron. They are, we hint, supported to a degree by a larger, there are outside influences that are helping this, but it's very important that this appear to be a completely local movement.
Right.
Because
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, I mean, it's kind of fun because one might think of like, Sauron declaring himself in Mordor and like trying to bring everybody to the worship of him. One might sort of immediately assume, I mean, the very first thing that I think of, right, is him sending out like, armed missionaries, right, to like compel the, with this kind of, we're now going to impose this new worship upon you by force, probably. And, but instead having him do it this way, having him say like, okay, my emissaries, go out into each of these regions and work with whatever you find there. Right. Like, here's the goal. Right. But, do whatever you have to do to bring them through to that. And I think that's a much more, creepy, devious, and effective kind of approach, to this whole thing.
It's more the Sauron that we've been making up until this point. And Marie points out that because there's grassroots support amongst the common people, that's the main reason the Queen isn't cracking down on this, because they haven't hurt anybody, and a lot of people kind of like it, and so
it's not like it's an alien invasion, alien to the city. And it's not like it's, okay, so it's not like somebody else coming in and imposing their culture on them, or, it's just growing up naturally from within. So it's growing up unnaturally, right, from within.
Yeah.
So when the Mouth of Sauron shows up, she's already been sort of active behind the scenes. Is she just kind of coming out of the shadows now?
She's probably been in contact. She's arriving in the city.
Okay.
Right. So she hasn't like been hiding out in somebody's basement, for a while. She is arriving in the city, and presumably she's been in contact with, the what leadership there is amongst the cult of Sauron in the city. And her whole, she's like, hey, so there seems to be a lot of people who are really into the cult of Sauron in your city, and you have that beautiful temple that's just standing idle and in ruins, and we would happily bring some jobs to your city and put money in your coffers just to rebuild the temple,
help you recover
workers,
your own history. And Yeah.
I mean, how could that possibly be bad?
Right. Who says no? Absolutely.
The queen doesn't.
Right. Exactly. And with how do we do her arrival? Do we show her arriving? Is she going to be acclaimed by the people? Is this going to be something? Is people are excited about this when she comes? Is this an anticipated event? Does she just show up?
That's a good question, and because we haven't, like, nobody's actually produced a script on this one. But what I'm thinking of is this idea that, like, as she comes in, she probably has like a little entourage, right? Nothing huge, tasteful, right? She doesn't have a genie running out into the street singing her praises as they go.
Right.
But there would be people in the street who, like, do some sort of, like, gesture that's associated with the cult of Sauron. Like the way, like, if the Inquisition were riding into town, right? And people would cross themselves as as it happened. Something along those lines. It would be really interesting, and there would be people who would be openly excited. But
what's
also
the
some
gesture,
people.
Do you think?
I'm terrified to.
Let's see. Okay. What's the gesture? All right. Okay. What would be associated with Sauron?
Yeah, Marie says to avoid the Heil Hitler. Yes.
Yeah.
That is precisely the sort of, like,
Not
obviously
going there.
Anything that actually actively resembles either a Hitler salute or crossing yourself is 100% off the table.
Yeah. No questions. No, let's come at this from another direction. Just from internally, right? Okay, so what would be I was thinking about or even like, what if like the covering of the eyes or something like that, maybe.
That might be misinterpreted as some sort of, it's not specific enough.
Not specific.
That would be just interpretative of like, I won't make eye contact with you.
Right. Yeah, no, something. See, I'm trying. The eye is the
like
one obvious thing.
If the gesture was something like this and then pointing to the forehead, like like a specific call to the eye, like my eyes are the eye or something like that.
Right.
I feel like rings would be too on the nose.
Yeah. Besides, you can't make finger gestures without it looking really weird. I'm almost tempted. It's hard because the eye is a major association, but
the captives at Pelennor had the eye branded on them, so that seems to be a symbol of the most. Well, yeah. Where was it? Does it say where they were branded, or does it just say they had the eye branded on them?
Wasn't it? No. Does it say that it was branded on the heads that get lobbed into Minas Tirith?
I don't remember. It's been too long. I've been in the Silmarillion. Like, all my reading time has been in the Silmarillion since this started. So,
Yeah.
It's the beheaded captives. So if their heads are branded, and if it turned out that it is the forehead, which is the logical place to brand somebody, then having them do that, because that's something you do, like, with your head tilted down, like that.
Or even if they. What would Sauron want people to do? Like, it's like, you gotta think of like the rationale for physical gestures like this, like there's a symbolic meaning, but it's a kind of expression of
Yeah, but standing at attention, it's too vague.
Yeah, and I wouldn't think that that's what Sauron would want anyway. I'm trying to think of, like, what are some of the signs of, like, the external forms of worship that Sauron would want, would be like how he would want to train people.
You could do something where it's the giving of the heart and the mind.
I see. With Sauron, I keep going back to Sauron is all about domination and fear, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's less like willing servants. I mean, it's not that he's not looking for willing servants, but he is looking for those that just like submit.
So, okay, what about an upraised fist like hung over the head? Or would that look too ridiculous? Like be over a bowed head like that.
That's possible. Oh, that's interesting, actually. Symbolically speaking, the like I submit and bow before like the strength and the might of the Black Hand, right?
Yeah. And
the Black Hand is one of the things that he's called, which is, I mean, it doesn't get pictorially represented like the eye does, but I mean, it's that's interesting. That's well, an interesting possibility.
No, because that just looks like you're trying to keep the rain off.
Right.
But that might work as something.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of really good supplicating gestures are kind of taken, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good. David and Stephen were both checking the text. It doesn't say exactly where they're branded. It just says that all were branded with the foul token of the widless eye. They could make like a symbol. I mean, can you like do with your fingers like some kind of like eye? I don't know how you'd do it. Some kind of eye. I don't know. Like if there's like a finger gesture that you could do that would like form something like an eye.
Somebody's gonna screenshot.
I know we're gonna like we're making all these like weird gestures,
I know,
trying to
get
figure it
myself
out.
in trouble. But the circle gesture like this is often used as an evil eye.
Right.
Like even in Fiddler on the Roof, she does the she makes a circle with her fingers and like spits on it symbolically to oh no, get the evil eye out of here, right?
Yeah. No, there's lots of traditional gestures for the evil eye and the repulsion of the evil eye. So making an evil eye symbol, I mean, like, and the nice thing about that gesture is that it can suggest the eye or it can suggest the ring.
Right. Especially if it's over the head.
Right.
Yeah, that looks like you're holding your unicorn horn.
I know. It just, yeah. 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 I think the over the head thing, I like the fist over the head, I think could work. Yeah. Especially since it works well as just like a simple thing, like when she's walking by, right? Just to like bow and do this.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't have to be, it's not a big, huge thing. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
The
but
historical evil eye was usually putting two peace signs of the hand together. I've never seen that, Ryan. This is Ryan Kimmel from YouTube. I've never seen.
Like
I've
this?
seen
like this, basically. Sort of.
I've seen a few different gestures. I've never heard of that one.
I kept trying to insert because Sauron's eye has got the cat slit, the vertical slit,
right?
The vertical pupil. So I was trying to insert a vertical line, but I couldn't make my fingers do it. So
yeah.
But yeah, some kind of evil eye gesture that could definitely work. Now Stephen is suggesting we skip the hand signals and just give them some kind of physical token to hold up.
again, that requires more of an investment than I think most people are willing
Right.
to give up until this point. Maybe later on in the season, you would start seeing things like that pop up. You would see
Mhm.
more and more people wearing the some sort of
Some kind of
jewelry that
talisman. Yeah. Yeah.
right. But like people in their daily lives, like this is the first time an actual emissary of Sauron has shown up in town in these people's lifetimes,
Hmm.
in living memory, and so like they know what they're supposed to do immediately because they want and they it's again it's like when the Inquisition comes to town, you want to show, oh yeah, no, I'm in the club, right?
Yeah.
uh
Yeah. By the way, I just had a really good idea, semi-related to this, but connecting back to the discussion from last time about the Old Hope, right?
yes,
And how I wanted to have a symbol for the Old Hope, and we were talking, Nick, you and I were talking on the text chat about a sun disk, perhaps,
yeah,
as a thing.
yeah,
What if there's like a sun disk with, like rays emerging from
yeah,
it, as the,
yeah,
showing like the shining forth of hope, right? And that's the symbol of the Old Hope. What if
yes,
Sauron's eye icon is a deliberate perversion of the Old
yes,
Hope one? So
yeah,
you've got like the disc of the sun is replaced by the eye, right? Like, so like the
hmm,
iris of the eye of Sauron is essentially
yeah.
like superimposed on the disc, and the
Oh
rays are
my
still like
gosh,
there, but they're turned into flames, right?
yes. So this wouldn't be in the temple itself, but in the old city, right?
Right.
You would see what had been the sun disk symbol carved on the old mud brick walls
Yeah. Yeah.
of the city, because
Yeah.
these people were also people of the old hope before the
Yeah.
Numenorians got a hold of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Sauron comes along and takes over, and so they carve the eye into all of
Over top
those.
of it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so Sauron.
Isn't it?
Very
Isn't it?
Sauron.
Yeah. It's very
Wow.
Sauron. It's very Sauron.
That's I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Me
brilliant.
too. Me too. See, Marie, you were skeptical about this whole let's introduce the cult symbols of the Old Hope, but I'm telling you, man, this is gonna work. This is gonna work. Okay. Yes. All right. Some kind of evil eye thing.
Yeah.
Some kind of evil eye thing. And if then we have, that actually suggests yet another reason to have some kind of like circle or disc thing be involved, right, in whatever it is that we do. But okay. All right. Sorry, that was that was a slight sidetrack, but an interesting one. All right, so
Yeah.
she arrives not with a huge amount of fanfare, but it's also clear that she is acknowledged by like the true believers who are already
Yes.
there in town, right? So
Or even the even the like Easter and Christmas
yeah,
going crowd.
right, yeah, exactly. Okay, so then episode 6 is when we get the debate with the street preacher, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
That goes awesome.
right, yeah. So Abrazan starts yelling at the street preacher, who mops the floor with him, right?
Oh yeah.
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 Because like the street preacher's got all his facts lined up, like he pulls out his binder, and no studies show that 59% of all
You're right.
Sauron believers are physically stronger than people who are not Sauron believers.
Right.
It's also weird that all the Sauron believers are men, but
Yeah, right. No, exactly. And so the Mouth of Sauron is watching this from the audience, right? And we have her
Yes.
kind of sidling up to Arnuben, who is also
Yes.
watching and dying 1,000 deaths as his brother humiliates
Yes.
himself.
Yes.
Okay. Meanwhile, we have the Rogren escape,
Mm-hmm.
and with that, the arrival of Hador in the north, right? The
Mm-hmm.
establishment of Hador in the north, really. Not the arrival of the people, but the arrival of Hador himself. And we've got Haleth killing Tevildo. So that's really interesting. We have two basically major conflicts, right? Good guys overcoming the bad guys, right? We have good guys victorious in two separate engagements during that episode, and then we have Abrazan embarrassing himself and soundly losing his debate.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
So one of the important things that comes out of the conversation that Arnuben has with the Mouth of Sauron is that she says to him, well, everything great that happens through men of words, not men of action. And while there's a lot of action in this episode, it all kind of transpires because people use their words, because Fingon brings men up to the north. Diriel is like the poster child, right? Like she is literally what the Mouth of Sauron is talking about here. And then Beleg in regards to the relationship between Thingol and Haleth, because you put Thingol and Haleth in a room together, nothing gets done.
Nothing productive. Right. Okay, no, so that's very interestingly framed there, with the Mouth of Sauron giving this keen and totally accurate advice to Arnuben there. Okay, so now we're back into the classroom basically with Incanus in episode 7.
Yes. This is kind of an acknowledgement of the fact that the relationship, the problems in the relationship between Gondor and Harad are not entirely one-sided.
Right.
Harad joined with Sauron. Like, that's bad. That's not a good look. Right.
Yeah.
We don't want that. But maybe that wasn't a great reason for Gondor to like aggressively continue to go after them for the next few thousand years and cut off trade. Like, there's no trade going on between the north and the south. Like, nothing gets past Gondor.
Exactly. And it's pretty clear in like the heyday of Gondor, right, that there were a lot of the kings of Gondor, the ones that named themselves things like South Victor and things like that, right? Yeah. Who were just imperialist, right? Who were first and foremost interested in expanding the wealth and power of Gondor. And I have no doubt, it does not seem a strain at all to imagine that some of those kings, began unjust wars with some of their neighbors like this, and that would be remembered. That seems entirely right. I mean, because that's Gondor's. I love that line. I think it's in the Akalabeth about Numenor, right? When he says it had reached the zenith of its bliss, but not yet of its power, right?
Yes.
Gondor, you can see, goes through a similar thing. And by the time it begins to wane, right, when you got the death of the king, and then you've got, and all these other, you've got the kin strife and the plague and everything else, that it's been in moral decline before that. And again, so I think that we definitely don't shy away from that here when we're dealing with the Haradrim side of things. So Gandalf is going to be connecting this explicitly to the Council of Estelad?
Yes. Essentially that, like, so there is definitely a picture painted at Estelad of the elves as kind of holding the Estelad culture down. Curufin and Celegorm in the north are definitely putting restrictions on the people of the Estelad. Don't hunt there, don't kill those animals, don't cut down those trees. They can't even get into Nan Elmoth or Doriath.
Right.
And then on the western border, they just had to make these huge capitulations to the Green Elves of Osirian, thanks to Galadriel, that they see as kind of unfair. Their lives are hard enough without the elves coming in and hemming them in like that.
Right.
And so, but at the same time, the elves are fighting the devil.
Right.
Maybe we give them a break.
Right. Right. Can you not make things more difficult? Can you not jog our elbow while we're trying to do this? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so I mean, this is all it's about. So we have a like discussion about basically Gandalf engaging in discussions with an eye towards reconciliation, right?
Yeah.
And in encouraging them to be thinking about. And of course, it's interesting, right? Because we have again the whole thing reversed. Instead of challenging people to think like, well, Gondor have not necessarily always been the good guys, right? In every conflict they've ever been in.
Yeah.
Instead, of course, it's all reversed because he's talking to these two guys, and so he's having to kind of defend like Gondor are not always the bad guys, right? Like you guys think.
Well, and also like acknowledging, like you can acknowledge that, right? Like, for example, okay, during World War II, right? The United States is fighting in World War II. The United States at that point had done some pretty nasty things to a bunch of different people who happened to not look very much like me at all, and some of which concurrently, Japanese internment was happening at the time.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of nasty things happening historically and currently.
Right.
But we gotta fight the Nazis, guys.
Right.
Like, it's still gotta happen.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the kind of there's a sort of parallel that we're establishing here between Hodor at Estolad at the council and Gandalf in with in his teachings here.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, presenting multiple sides, but still thinking about that. Okay. And then episode 8, this is the Andreth among the Haladin episode?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we took that opportunity to send one of our characters to a basement meeting, to a basement church.
Right. Arnubin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, does he go? This is him just doing fact finding on his own?
It's more complex than that. I think originally in the beginning, Abrazan is I think found out about a meeting that's going to be taking place because the meetings are secret.
Right. And then he wants to go, and Arnubin is like, "Yeah,
are you for real? Yeah. Like, well, were you not there when all that stuff just happened?"
Right. Maybe I should go this time instead of you. Right. Okay. Now I remember that. Okay. So, but Gandalf knows it's happening?
I'm trying to remember if Gandalf is even in those scenes. I don't think he is. Oh, between the brothers and Gandalf. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
These scenes have actually been performed, and
you
were there.
It was in these scenes, yeah, or at least I was witnessing them. Yes. Okay.
This should have been the one moment where you
where I should remember. Yeah, exactly. I should. Well, I remembered that part. I remembered the part about Arnubin's lines about how well his previous attempt had gone.
I mean, I read that script myself like at least 50 times, so like I should have definitely remembered. But this is going to lay out the rationale, the legitimate rationale why people would be in on this. Like people who are not. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot to say, Gandalf, in those scenes. That's why I'm not really remembering it. His presence there. But people fall for evil all the time, and without themselves being complete monsters.
Right.
You have to get there. You don't just wake up one day and, hey, I'm gonna be a raging lunatic and genocide.
That's Sauron's whole thing. Like that's what he's trying to do culturally here. Acknowledging, knowing that it takes time to get work people, to the genocide point. Right. Exactly. Time to murder babies, Marie. Right. Exactly. Or like maybe step one isn't I'm going to go and slaughter all the younglings. Maybe that's not
Yeah.
the most persuasive way to depict that
Yeah.
kind of
Like
trajectory.
maybe
Yeah.
you don't go from this guy needs to be arrested and stand trial to I am now going to murder babies for him in the same day.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 That's maybe not convincing. I think we have empirical evidence to suggest. Okay, but so all we have here is to show him listening to the speech, right? He's
Yes.
there and he hears the speech.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So then, moving forward, we have fantasy number 1 accomplished with Gandalf in a hookah bar, right?
The image no one knew they needed.
Yes, exactly. And so what we have him doing here, right, is he's expressing his concerns, like basically both the Queen especially, but he also have been kind of passive, right? I mean, he's not been coming at all, even though he sees the street preacher at the beginning, and we have that whole light versus darkness juxtaposition from episode 1. It's not like Gandalf has exactly come in here guns blazing, in trying to, route the, or even like, alert people, like, we haven't had him going to the Queen saying like, look, emissaries of Sauron, this is seriously bad news. You've got to do whatever you got to do to get them out of the city. Like, we haven't had that yet, right? So am I right in thinking this is really the first time we're going to show Gandalf making, movements in this direction?
Yeah, in fact, in an earlier episode, I believe, there was a situation where when the Mouth of Sauron first arrived, and and Arnubin was telling Gandalf, like, what, both of us know what Mordor is,
right?
Like, why aren't you doing anything about this? And Gandalf's like, what do you want me to do? You want me to just like tie your mom's hands behind her back and take over the city and force all of your people to go along with it? That's not going to happen.
Right. Exactly. And as Maria is saying, he's a foreigner and an outsider. He can't exactly come in and take charge and determine policy. But so he and the Queen are both in the hookah bar hanging out?
No. He overhears some people talking. It's essentially the Green Dragon moment. And he overhears. It's basically the same sort of conversations that were happening at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, when we get the young Frodo. He's cracking, sort of language and whatnot, and then he goes to talk to the Queen about what he's just heard.
So, and it's his concern is about the renovation of the temple. So, like, basically, Gandalf is saying like this is proceeding apace here, like this is proceeding fast.
I think it's that the festival, which is normally kind of a secular affair, is definitely going to have more religious connotations this time, and that kind of concerns him. Like, this is a little bit further than he was prepared to just allow to happen without saying things about it. And so essentially the Queen's like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have the parade route end at the palace instead of at the temple. This way we have control over how things end up, rather than the cult of Sauron having control over how things end up.
Right. So this is the first time that we really have that she sort of accepts that there's a real conflict between her and the cult of Sauron.
Right. Like I said, at the beginning, she really doesn't have an idea of how quickly things are about to start happening. Nothing has really changed in this city for what, 3,000 years, 2,000 years? And so this is kind of a little too late adjustment to the change that's inevitable.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so this is the love episode, right? This is the Andreth and Ignor episode.
Yes.
While this is happening.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of the phrase "too little, too late" as juxtaposed with their romance.
And there's it's a misunderstanding. It's a coming to understanding too late to actually change anything. Is really what's happening there. I'll grant that this is not the strongest connection to the main story, but
and they don't have to. I mean, I don't think they have to be slaved to each other, and it could be too hokey if we do that too much. But yeah. But
there's there are definitely connections that can be drawn in here.
Well, the number one thing that I see here, and we get a little bit of it in the B plot, I suppose, in this episode. What this makes me think of is sort of less the romance story than the big push question, right? Or really not even just specifically the big push, but the question of what do they do, right? How do we proceed with the siege, right? What can we do? What's the plan? And the desire of so many just to continue the way that things have always been.
Yeah, well, this is kind of the episode that sets both Fingolfin and the Queen on the path to their final destinations. In fact, the people of most of the people who are featured in the frame story, their final destinations are going to be determined by this decision, this kind of misstep that the Queen makes. Although I don't know that not making that misstep would have necessarily saved her.
Right.
Right. And this, meanwhile, in the main story, Fingolfin's big push is definitely coming way too late. Maegor's was trying to talk him into action 500 years ago.
Right.
And they didn't take it. And so now, now all this decision is doing is putting everybody on the path to where they're going to be.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
This is definitely the third act turn in the in the course of the season.
Right. And the thing that I really like about this, as you say, on the one hand, like what she's doing is a mistake and is going to provide the opportunity to come against her and is going to create problems in the city and everything. But at the same time, as you say, if she'd done nothing, that would not have been the right call either. Right. I mean, one of the things that I like about this is this sense of the Mouth of Sauron has her outmaneuvered on every front. Like there's
by the time the Mouth of Sauron shows up, she's already won.
It's over. Yeah, exactly. And Gandalf also is in a very tricky situation, right? I mean, unless he's gonna, unless we're gonna get, Incanus the Grey uncloaked there in the middle of the town square, and him, throwing fireballs at the Mouth of Sauron, what's he going to do? What can he do? Right? How can he? Right. His whole goal is to try to help to preserve the culture of this city, right? To keep them strong and resisting. But he can't do that by force, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can't. It's not. I mean, he can't be like counter brainwashing people, right? Yeah. I mean, there's only so much he can do. And the Mouth of Sauron just wins, and she's been winning. And that, I mean, and as we know that, as we have chosen this city-state as kind of our representative of Harad, right? We know it's going to happen with Harad, right? Sauron's going to win. He's going to, in fact, to dominate Harad. And so, that is this sort of narrative inevitability. And I think that this kind of helps us to see how that happens, right?
Right. It's really interesting because it gives us a chance to see these people, as humans who made decisions based on the information they had at the time. Like, these aren't bad people, like, not more so than anybody else, like, if anybody was going to, when I'm always amused by people who say something to the effect of, well, if I were around, say, in the Middle Ages, I would have thought that, divine right of kings was absolutely
Right.
preposterous. No,
No,
you
you
would
wouldn't.
not. What are you talking about? You
Hmm.
believe most of the things that most people that live in your time believe. Why on
Exactly.
earth do you think that would be different? You're not some kind of iconoclast because you think that that's wrong now.
Right. 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 Exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, no, I think that's really great. Now, by the way, we're kind of understanding that this whole time that time is passing and these things are developing, and Gandalf is sort of powerless to do too much. When we left, Arnuban in the basement meeting of the Cult of Sauron, before, we had a hint that he was listening. Right, that he was listening, that he was interested, and then we don't see him for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So we're,
Yeah.
what is there anything active being done to sort of imply or like to, so that, I mean, we're just supposed to understand that during this time that's passing, he's probably been continuing going and has been convinced.
Yeah. That was one of the things that we kind of wanted to avoid, was to make his straight to killing the younglings. We wanted to avoid a situation where we were observing his betrayal coming.
Right.
We don't have a lot of time in these bits.
Yeah.
We have just enough time to characterize the older brother and his position, because that's really what's important. Like, we kind of see where the younger kid is coming from, and he's going to have an opportunity to articulate his position.
Right. And moreover, it follows the drift of the people in the city. So, right, in a sense, by showing how they are kind of sliding in that direction, that makes his slide more plausible because he's sliding with the majority there.
Right. He's and he doesn't even have to. We don't even have to be led to believe that he actually believes in the religion around Sauron, but he's very aware that Sauron is a powerful individual who is very clearly, he's looking at the handwriting on the wall.
This is the direction the wind is blowing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
an east wind is setting in. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Nope. Makes all kinds of sense. Okay. So in episode 10, we're focusing on Abrazan and his choices, right?
Yes.
That's the primary focus there.
And it's a very, very small moment. Like, we're hitting a 4 minutes of a 10-minute conversation between him and his mother. Right. And so we needed a chance to spend some time with Mom because she's going away. And we need a chance to really give, as Marie says, the choices that he's making don't have anything to do with the politics. Like, who is this guy? Right. Other than a meathead, like, who is he, and what determines who he's going to be and what choices he's going to make?
Right. Exactly. And just even just kind of introducing the fact that his moral choices are going to matter, right? Are going to be important.
Right. And I think that this was kind of aimed at linking up with, because we're seeing a lot of the leadership of our half a moment. Yeah, we're seeing kind of the leadership of the people in the main story, and if we don't, their choices matter. They have impact on hundreds of thousands of people. And so essentially that's what is happening here. Is that she's telling him, you can't be like anybody else. You can't. With great power comes great responsibility.
That's it. Yes. Setting up then the big turning point in the assassination of the Queen in episode 11. Now, there's what seems to be, frankly, a fairly ham-handed framing attempt, right? I mean, I don't mean ham-handed on the part of the scriptwriters. I mean, on the part of the assailants, right? I mean, that like it's not like, it's arranged such that like an innocent third person comes in and sees him standing over her body with a bloody dagger in his hand or something more subtle like that. Yeah.
I mean, it's specifically his dagger, and the importance is laid on the fact that this is something that the people are willing to believe.
That's why I actually kind of liked the ham-handedness. Like there's a gesture being made towards, we're not going to expect or ask the people just to like overthrow the royal family, spontaneously, right? They've not done nearly enough. There's not been nearly enough unrest to just like, let's throw a civil war by episode 11, right? But if all they need is the pretense, right? The pretense to get rid of Abrazan, and the fact that pretense is relatively thin, right? I mean, if there were goodwill towards him and towards his family, then surely somebody would be like, well, okay, it was his knife, but is there any real reason to think that he did it apart from, I mean, like anybody could have had that. I mean, but nobody does, right? Again, like a pretense is given, and the swiftness with which that pretense is accepted is, testimony to their readiness to be done with him.
It's kind of the Reichstag fires, right? Like that's essentially what's happening here. And how many people believed that it was not in fact the Nazis who started the Reichstag fires? Maybe, but people publicly accepted it very, very quickly.
Right.
And also the older brother, Murray points out, the older brother goes missing, right? If he was in fact not guilty, why would he not come forward? But the idea was, because here was the problem, is that we had kind of planned for there to be this major coup and kind of civil unrest that happens at the same time as this happy festival.
Right.
Doesn't happen that way a lot. Right. Yeah. So what we wound up doing was making this such a fast, like Arnubin's execution of this plan is so precisely on point and perfect from beginning to end. The only thing he doesn't get ahead of is the fact that his brother escapes, right? And nobody was watching him while he was locked up down there. But he executes this plan with such efficiency that, like, who else could, like, this guy who is the son of the Queen, who is in mourning and just went to her funeral while the other brother is mysteriously missing, who was the next in line for the throne. Like, that's like the finger pointing is obvious, right? And there's surely a little bit of, well, the Queen kind of got what she deserved. That's going to be bubbling up in the population.
Right. Or at least they're not nearly as quick to, defend her. They don't miss her nearly as much as they might have done, a year ago, basically. Right.
And it's a testament to how quickly people can kind of turn against you that way. Mm-hmm. It happens very fast. In the world today, it happens extremely quickly, and you can have people all over the world mad at you in seconds, right?
Yes.
Right. But even in their time, they're living in a small insular community. As soon as everybody has the news, that's it. Right.
I love episode 12, the juxtaposition between the Dagor Bragollach and the parade. That's just awesome. Like, that's just fantastic. You know, the flames, and then the charge of the armies of Morgoth, juxtaposed with the parade, which is now increasingly, you know, a parade and celebration of Sauron, coming down the street. There's nothing I don't love about that juxtaposition. The way in which the battle and the fire and the blood that it's framing, just without even trying, gives this extremely sinister, I mean, it's so cool. Like, you see all the happy, the cheerful parade and the happy people and everything. And then you see the blood and the fire, in the distance. And it's like you barely even have to do anything, right? You barely even have to do anything at all in that to make that work.
That was easy. And the lead up to the mock sacrifice, like, we wanted people to be sitting going, what are they about to, and then they don't
yeah
but like, we know what that was in imitation of.
Right.
It's very clear where that was going.
Right. Now
and one day will in fact go.
Right, exactly. Now, a quick clarification here. This is part of the traditional festival?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's not. This is a return to an older tradition. So back in the olden days, this festival would end with a sacrifice of the most beautiful child in the city, selected by the elders, and all that. But we're not doing that now. We're celebrating our heritage without murder.
Right.
Now.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, that's great. It's just great. I mean, and especially after, we've just had so that we start off with the parade at the beginning, right? And the child throwing ring trinkets into the audience, right? Yeah. And then we have the Dagor Bragollach including the deaths of Aignor and Angrod, right? So, like, you've just seen the death of, like, the elf who was the romantic lead of this, in this season, and, another elf character that we've been with now for 3 seasons. We met him in season 3, and, so we got all these corpses of characters that we've known for a long time and have been really important throughout the season. And then we cut back to what looks like we're going to end with the sacrifice of the child. I mean, there's every reason to, like, with the frame of mind that people are in, that's going to seem inevitable.
And because presumably the people watching the pageantry know that nobody's going to get murdered, but the audience doesn't know that, and so everybody's like excited and cheering, and like it looks like they're cheering on this murder of this child.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, good times.
Okay, so then in episode 13, we have, how does the confrontation arise? Abrazan and Gandalf were put in prison. Gandalf escapes and then frees Abrazan earlier on?
No, so Gandalf is imprisoned in the palace. Abrazan is kidnapped because he can't be officially imprisoned. He's kidnapped and held under the temple. And so Abrazan escapes from where he's being held under the temple. I forget exactly what he does. He MacGyvers his way out or whatever it is. And he goes, confronts his brother, doesn't kill him, but then now he's got it, like, the alarm is raised, and now he's got to get out of here. Who better to help him get out of here but his old pal Incanus, who he breaks out of jail with the appropriate use of leverage or whatever, and they break out of the palace riding the white elephant that was in fact the mount for the child parade, right, earlier on, followed by the entire pachyderm parade of
Right.
the royal elephants who were
Right.
where would he even find chewing gum in Harad, Stephen? The real answer, Stephen, is that I don't remember. I'm sure that we discussed it, and I just don't remember.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. So tell me more about the confrontation with the brother. So this is where he's is he still confused about, how much does he know about Arnubin's involvement?
So here's the situation. I don't think that he knows that Arnubin is involved until he confronts him, because Arnubin can't let him walk out of that room. He can't. He's got to get rid of him, right? And so they have a conversation where Abrazan tells his brother all the stuff that's happened to him, and Arnubin is, oh, that's terrible, but they found your knife in her body, and he's like, no, I know, but it wasn't me, it was missing. And then he tries to stab him, right? So but of course Abrazan gets the upper hand in the fight,
Right.
Does not kill his brother, because the good guy never kills his brother.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, and then
The final tag is him arriving in Minas Tirith with Gandalf.
Yes. Because he is eventually going to be the Palamedes of Thorongil's round table.
Oh yeah. So looking forward to that.
I don't know how that's going to be. We just have to add more people, right? We need to get more people sent to Minas Tirith to be to be part of Thorongil's posse.
That's it.
Who's like a good Prince of Rohan that we could find a way to throw in there? That would be interesting. Theoden's a little kid, so that doesn't work.
Well, I mean, there's Thengel with his Gondorian connections, of course.
Yeah.
But Marie will remind me of the dates. I'm not remembering the dates well enough to remember
Thengel
how
is
that's
in
going to line
Gondor
up
at this
with.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if Aragorn as Thorongil gets to hang out with Thengel as well as Abrazan, that would be cool. That would be fun.
Get Thengel's going home before Aragorn.
I was afraid he did.
He's got a brother,
I was afraid he did. Yeah. Could we delay him a little bit? I mean, come on. How important is that?
Éomer's grandfather's Éomer is Theoden's direct nephew, so that doesn't
is
work.
his nephew. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, but because Thengel is in fact Éomer's grandfather.
Yeah.
We'll get a Rohirrim and a Prince of Dal Amroth. No worries. Yes, Maria.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, the Prince of Dal Amroth, I mean, that kind of goes without saying, right? That's like a no-brainer. Converging on Pelargir and everything. Obviously, Dal Amroth is going to be very interested in what happens at Pelargir. So, yeah. Okay. Later. No problem. Good. Well, I think it works really well. I mean, to me, like, the parade Dagor Bragollach juxtaposition is like the big payoff of the whole thing. Honestly, I just love it. That is really, really the wonderful moment. And of course, we review at the end our reversal of the whole Boromir Faramir pairing basically that we have going on. with them there. Turns out the younger is not so good a wizard's pupil, or rather pupil of the wrong wizard, perhaps. So that's cool. But all right, awesome. I think this, and I know there was so much that we kind of threw at this initially when we came up with the idea. I mean, we could have done a whole season of Gandalf and Harad if we'd, given ourselves free reign. So I think, especially given the restrictions and everything, I think you guys have done an awesome job at planning this through. I think this works really well. And of course, as we discussed at the beginning and the end, Gandalf fails, right? I mean, Gandalf is not able to save, Hobbiton of the South, and Hobbiton of the South is going to become a stronghold of Mordor as we move on through. And the tragedy of that, I think, is important. But Marie, as you say, it's not a complete loss, right? He doesn't save the city, but he does save the prince. So we do have still a sort of symbolic victory. Not to mention, I love and yes, Stephen, he does end up on a white oliphaunt at the end. So there we have Gandalf on a white elephant at the head of a charging herd of elephants there at the end. So yeah, I mean, that was the number one thing. As soon as we sent him to Harad, that was like the number one thing that obviously had to happen. But yeah, and here's the other really cool thing. Notice the grim parallel with Gandalf and the Tooks, right? When he goes to Hobbiton in the north, he finds likely lads who are like the sons of prominent families, and what does he do? He leads them off on strange adventures in strange lands, right? He's famous for kind of luring them away and being a bad influence and taking them away from the culture of their people and making them much less respectable than they were before, right?
Into the Blue, which is, of course, a reference to the Blue Wizards who went off and disappeared.
Exactly. But anyway, so we see him do it. This is exactly what happens here, right? He takes the oldest son of the house and he leads him. In the end, he takes him off into the blue, right? He takes him off on a mad adventure, all by himself, separated from the rest of his culture, right? Now, so we see an echo of that same pattern, and yet such a grim difference, right? Here, compared to the Tooks who went off on adventures with Gandalf from Hobbiton, or from the Shire. Really cool. Exactly, Marie. Gandalf is setting up an exchange program. That's pretty much exactly what's going on there. So I love it. I mean, I think that's a really neat shape at the end. It picks up on a lot of different things in some pretty subtle ways, which I think is really fun. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Our next session is going to be session number 39 on the 23rd of September. So right after Bilbo's birthday, we will be meeting again. And we will talk about episode 12 and the Dagor Bragollach. So excited for the fire and destruction next time. I'm hoping for maps with arrows and flowcharts and things that we can discuss, to see how everything goes.
Might have to go over the maps that I prepared last time and make them a little bit more dynamic looking.
Right.
They're just circles on the map.
Right. We don't need full animations or anything, but we definitely want to be able to understand what's going on here in the Dagor Bragollach, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody said on the forums, like, "Oh wow, I wasn't expecting like a full-on war movie." It's like, yeah, that's 2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours of war, baby.
That's it. Yep. The Dagor Bragollach in 2 hours. So yeah, that's exactly what we're gonna get. So we will have. Rumor is we'll have a script to talk about next time. Maybe. As long as it passes the review process.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Very good. Well, looking forward to that. So we'll see everybody again in 2 weeks. And then after that, we only have 2 more sessions left. We have the session on episode 13, second part of the Dagor Bragalok, and then, of course, the music episode. So
I'm looking forward to that one, too.
Yeah, that's always fun. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.